our vice chair.
Welcome, everybody. Shruti has gotten a promotion at work and had to go to Maine. So you got me instead. Mark, I have a question. Can the people on the people who are commissioners who are dialing in, can they use the chat to communicate?
They cannot communicate with us virtually in any manner, unfortunately.
What if they do sign language?
Yeah. But yes, you're welcome to come in.
Yeah, we're
Perfect, Nelson. So we may be getting quorum then. So with that, I can start the introductions. Jill, if you'd like, I can start the.
Yes, please do.
Yes. All right. So I'll say it again. So good evening, everyone. This is the September 19th Park and Recreation Commission hybrid meeting. My name is Marco Rivero, and I am the staff liaison to the PRC. I would like to remind our attendees that the PRC meeting will be recorded, and that has already begun. We ask that commissioners, presenters, and attendees please mute your microphones and turn off your video feeds if you are not speaking. For those attending via telephone, you can mute and unmute your microphones by dialing *6. The top toolbar contains a raise your hand function in case a commission member or presenter has a question during the meeting. Commissioners and presenters may share their screens using their content box, which is right above on the toolbar. The chat box will also be checked routinely, mainly to address logistical questions or issues during the meeting. During the public comment period and during the agenda items discussion, the chair will recognize virtual participation first, and then in-person attendees will be able to comment. And that is only if we have an in-person quorum for our commissioners. As way of introduction information, we will also be holding a public comment period at the beginning of the meeting. Each public commenter will have up to 3 minutes for that comment period, and I will signal to the speaker once the time is up. And I believe today we have 2 speakers that have signed up. Over to our vice chair.
Good evening, and we'll just go right into adopting the minutes from the 18th. Are there any discussion? And is everybody okay with adopting the minutes?
Do we have quorum at this point?
Or did you see Adam out here?
Yeah, I think you can't find us.
Our usual route.
Yeah, I was like,
All right. At this point, now we can take action.
All right. All those in favor of the August 15th minutes? Signify by saying aye. Even the people online can vote. Okay. Minutes are passed.
I did want to recognize that now we are now at in-person quorum, so we can take action on voting items. So thank you, Madam Vice Chair.
Okay. So now it's back to you for the public comment.
All right. So we'll recognize first for the public comment period, Mr. William Barrett, and that'll be followed by Ann Bodine. So Mr. Barrett. I don't think he's with us at this point. Mr. Barrett? Okay, we'll go back to you once you come on to your. So we recognize.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So thank you very much, Madam Chair and Mr. Rivera, for letting me speak today. I am from Lyon Park. My name is Ann Bodine. I've lived in the county about 30 years. I just have some general comments, and then I'll try and bring it down to your commission's mandate. But I've talked to a lot of people around the county about Plan Langston Boulevard, and I have some larger concerns that I wanted to share with you, and hope you'll take them into consideration. In broad terms, the PLB plan will fundamentally change Highway 29 or Langston Boulevard from a key transit corridor with low to medium density to a green Main Street with buildings up to 15 stories. Specifically, those would be around the Spout Run Line Village Shopping Center. But density will continue along the boulevard up to 10 stories at Lee Heights and 7 stories further down at Harrison, with a lot of infill in between that will go above by right density. I'm concerned with some of that because a lot of what goes unsaid is that by right density will be added onto, and the county plan has this sort of buried within it in various sections that they will add onto it during site planning. They will allow extra penthouses that won't be counted. So 15 stories could become 18 stories. And that's on a very environmentally sensitive site that probably can't even accommodate underground parking because it's literally sits on top of Spout Run. So I have a lot of environmental concerns there that I hope you'll at least ask questions about. More broadly, I also have concerns that the county is on a mad dash to densify without looking at the long-term consequences. In 2018, the county projected 63,000 more residents by 2045 with then current zoning. And since then, we've added 12,000 people with a new Pentagon City sector plan. The county approved the missing middle plan that's going to allow 6 times more density inside neighborhoods. And the county is not reconciling all of these densification plans with all of the comprehensive plan goals. And that's where your commission comes in to look at some of our other priorities. Other concerns I have that the study began a long time ago in 2015, 2016. They came out with the first scenarios that actually modeled the density in 2021 in the middle of COVID. I think people were also preoccupied with missing middle at that time. There have been a lot of public engagements, but I think there's other priorities that we should be asking the county, why shouldn't they take priority? Namely, there's been population stagnation in the last 2 years. We even had a population loss. So some of these concerns where they're talking about housing crises, that's very ill-defined, and we need to ask ourselves, does that crisis still pertain? And has it changed in any way? And is Langston Boulevard density going to answer the problem? The next question is office vacancy surges. I think you're aware that's probably one of the largest priorities for the county. They have a record 23% office vacancy rate, which means a bleeding hole in the middle of their budget.
I'm sorry, that's time at 3 minutes.
That was 3 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Bodine.
You can submit written comments.
Yeah, she did.
Remind her that.
She can, and I just wanted to recognize too, to see if we had Mr. Barrett with us as well on the line. All right, so.
I'll just summarize his written comments.
Sure.
If you guys want to refer to him, he is a representative of, what's the name of the school? There's a school right
Yes.
across from like Heidelberg Bakery. And he's concerned about the Langston Boulevard plan with respect to encroaching on the space for the kids to play. So obviously we want to make sure kids have good space to play.
The Rivendell School.
Rivendell, that's it.
Is it a public elementary school? Is it
No, it's private.
Private
school,
school.
yeah.
What grades?
I believe it's K-8.
Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, we're on a tight timetable tonight.
Yep.
I hope everybody reviewed the slides before and have come up with their concerns, because we're going to try to get through these 2 presentations and our questions by 7:55. So I'll turn it over to you, Marco.
All right, so our first agenda item is the planned Langston Boulevard presentation discussion, and we have Natasha Alfonso from CPHD joining us tonight, who will be presenting on this topic.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you to the commission for inviting us. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, make sure that you all can see the slides. If you can just tell me just to make sure, because I'm moving things around. Can you see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, I'm going to have a relatively short presentation, so I want to make sure I allow enough time for you all to ask questions and for us to give you hopefully the answers that you want. Again, thank you for inviting us. My name is, as Marco said, is Natasha Alfonso Ahmed, and I am the project manager for the Langston Boulevard Planning Study. As most of you are aware, staff is in the process of developing and ultimately adopting a comprehensive, very high-level vision for the corridor that will guide both public and private investment long-term. We are currently completing phase 3 of a multi-phase planning study, which began in 2019. Based on prior analysis and community feedback that we've heard, we've developed and recently released the draft plan, which was in June. That plan includes new policies to support the goals and vision of a green Main Street, as well as preliminary information on implementation. The plan's vision and recommendations for corridor-wide elements, which include transportation and open space, apply to the complete planning area. The recommendations also focus primarily on the core areas, which are outlined in pink on this map, and includes areas that are located on or nearest to Langston Boulevard, areas designated for commercial and multifamily uses on the county's general land use plan, and in very limited locations, areas that include single detached homes. Recommendations for all elements will apply to the core study area for neighborhoods 2, 3, and 5, which includes 5 West and 5 East. Neighborhoods 1 and 4, which are East Falls Church and Cherrydale respectively, have adopted plans, and those policies will continue to apply in those areas. So the plan's policies and recommendations are centered around sustainability, environmental resilience, and equity by applying a sustainable and equitable approach to land uses, by leveraging proximity to transit and existing activity centers to reduce travel times along the corridor and carbon emissions, and by increasing housing supply and meeting the needs of diverse residents and household types along the corridor. The plan proposes goals and policies for 9 key planning elements supported by design principles and guidelines that are related to the built environment and the public realm. The policies for public spaces focus on expanding the public space network by achieving new POPs or privately owned public spaces with redevelopment. They also focus on providing a variety of space types, activities, uses, and sizes, and expanding the network of off-street pedestrian and bicycle corridors to ensure that new development provides adequate connections to these spaces. So there are 24 publicly owned spaces in the planning area with varying degrees of accessibility and types of amenities. The biggest barrier that we have in the planning area, obviously, to connectivity is Langston Boulevard, which, as we know, separates neighborhoods from nearby schools, public facilities, and public spaces. The corridor itself is very difficult to cross north-south. East-west, there's also very little connectivity, and there's significant changes in topography, which make walking and biking a lot harder and discourages that kind of activity. So to achieve the vision for this green Main Street in the planning area that links, again, neighborhoods to businesses, to the mixed-use activity nodes, to housing and public spaces, we need a new land use framework. This map that you see here illustrates how development in the corridor should be concentrated in the mixed-use activity hubs, connected by areas that are predominantly multifamily, to be able to expand opportunities, for increasing housing supply along the corridor and therefore affordability. The plan proposes 4 new activity hubs in addition to the existing ones, which are East Falls Church and Cherrydale. The framework itself supports the policies for public spaces by, again, concentrating development in the core areas to support commercial activity, expanded residential uses and densities, and access to new public spaces. So the policies on building form are aimed at achieving context-sensitive building design by focusing the tallest building heights at activity hubs, at key intersections, and within walking distance of transit or metro and bus stops, and by establishing minimum setbacks and upper story step backs and height transitions to ensure that the new development actually is sensitive to the adjacent environment. The plan's goal is to incentivize positive change in the core areas by providing other choices besides by right development. And we have indicated a couple of times that additional density and height is needed in order to encourage special exception development that will help implement the vision for the planning area and achieve countywide goals for increasing housing supply and affordability, sustainability and resilience, and of course, expanded network of public spaces. This diagram identifies the location of the existing spaces, which are the ones inside the gray circles, and the general location of the proposed new POPs or the new privately owned public spaces, which are inside the green circles. The circles themselves represent sort of the, is the area that is within the 5-minute walk or the quarter-mile radius to those spaces. The existing spaces, as you can see, are pretty well distributed and are generally spaced between a quarter mile and a half a mile from one another. The proposed new spaces are in areas along the corridor where the distance between, again, the existing spaces is greater than the 5-minute walk. So we're obviously trying to create better accessibility or more accessibility to spaces for all residents in the entire planning area. In general, the new spaces are identified, again, in activity hubs where the parcels are large and they can accommodate the space along with new development, where there's opportunity for consolidation with adjoining parcels, and where there's opportunity to provide stormwater detention or overland relief in order to reduce the downstream flooding and flood risk. The new spaces are anticipated to be delivered by the property owners and developers pursuing redevelopment, and we do expect that those spaces will be maintained and retained under private development while providing, again, public access easements to those spaces. So through this plan, there's a potential to increase, again, connectivity and achieve an additional 28 spaces in the core area. As I said, the planning area has 24, so this would add another 28 to just the core area. So in all of the neighborhood areas, the plan shows more public spaces in the form of greenways, parks and plazas, and certainly more than what we showed in the preliminary concept plan, which was released a year ago. In Area 2, for example, the plan increases the number of parks and plazas by 4 for a total of 6. In Area 3, the plan increases that by 2 for a total of 9. In Area 5 West, the plan increases it by 6 for a total of 12, 2 of which are in existing resource protection areas along I-66, the south side of I-66. And then finally, in Area 5 East, the plan increases that number by 1 for a total of 2 spaces. So the design guidelines that are included in the draft plan for the public realm are also intended to support the policies for public spaces. They provide recommendations for designing new parks and plazas, as well as existing and new greenways. The design guidelines include specific recommendations for the Custis Trail and particularly for development along the Custis Trail to make sure that there is sufficient building frontage and setbacks to accommodate space for pedestrians, for cyclists, and more importantly for landscape areas, since we know that in some portions of the trail it is pretty narrow. And then finally, this map or this slide just identifies the areas that we have recommended specific detention for underground, like underground vaults at these public spaces or overland relief. And as you can see, there are a few in Area 2, as well as in Area 3 and in Area 5 West, where the critical areas for detention and relief are needed. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take that.
We should probably recognize the virtual participants first.
Sure. Thank you very much for that presentation, and we will turn first to the people that are virtually participating. Do any commissioners have any comments or questions that are on the screen? Okay, I'll turn it over to Cole.
Thank you. It sounds like a massive undertaking for, we're adding lots of density and we've got a plan for schools and we've got a plan for green spaces. And right now, one of the things Parks and Rec has been doing is we're fighting for every square inch of green space that we can get. And what we've learned some things along the way, and I don't know if you have some lessons learned from Ballston and Clarendon, but when we deal with privately owned public spaces, what's happening is we get these requirements to activate the space, which essentially means that in these plazas, they become sales venues for the storefronts or ground floor of whatever's there, and sort of takes very much away from the notion of it being a green space. And I'm wondering if we're going to have maybe some restrictions or plans that are going to limit that kind of activity when they say, oh, we're going to have movies at night and tents in the day. And I'm a little concerned. I'd like it to really be publicly owned private space that has a spot for people to sit in and enjoy some green. So that would be one point of view anyway, to strongly recommend we not activate those spaces, but keep them as nice spots for people to sit, read the paper, walk the dog, whatever, green.
Cole, can I just make like one correction? I think you
Okay.
need to say you've been privately owned, publicly accessible space, not public space.
Right, public, I'm sorry, right, thank you. I just was wishing.
That's okay. I was like, just like concept.
Okay, so anyway, I just wondered if you had some thoughts on that or.
Sure. Well, the plan does identify the types of spaces that we'd like to see in each one of these neighborhood areas. And apologies, I was trying to minimize the amount of time because I know we only have until 7:55 and you have another item. But with me on the call is Ryan Bauma, who is the with ACOM planning consultant on the study. So if we need to, we can ask him some specific questions as well. But I just wanted to say that the plan identifies this sort of specific types that we would like to see in each one of these neighborhood areas. And it is pretty varied, but it does allow for flexibility to be able to determine whatever the types of uses and the design and all of that, at site plan, basically because many of these communities, we don't know when the developments are going to come in, what the real need in that particular area is. We have heard from a lot of communities that there's a real need for playgrounds and areas for activities for children. And so we would really like for that to be determined at site plan review when there's going to be more, of a global look of what the real needs are in those particular geographies.
I understand that part. I was more interested in the the commercial aspects of it. And what percentage has commercial space been designed into those pops?
So we are not identifying for any of them that there has to be commercial activity or, let's say, amenities that support commercial activities. Other than in the mixed use areas where we say there could be things that support commercial activities, but we're not defining.
Is that allowable in this plan?
Can you repeat that? I'm sorry.
What percentage of space can be commercial space of pop space? That's what I'm looking.
We are not defining that in this plan, again, to be able to leave that flexibility. But we're not saying that it has to be a minimum of X percent for commercial.
Just seems the flexibility is one way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd like it to be tilted in the space of green and people living there as opposed to the people selling things to the people who live there.
Okay, good point. Well, we'll take that back. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's turn to Adam now.
Yeah, it's kind of sort of piggybacking on Colt's question. So one of the goals in the public spaces master plan was for the county to acquire land. And it seems like most of this is focused on privately owned land. Is there any focus or any thought was given to using this plan as an opportunity for the county to potentially purchase or acquire publicly owned land?
Yeah, for publicly owned spaces. We have heard that as part of the feedback from the community, and we're certainly going to be adding some language in the RTA draft that will address that, mainly to clarify that the county does envision in certain strategic locations, let's say where there's excess public right-of-way or opportunities to convert public right-of-way to public spaces, that is a place where the county could strategically invest. So that's one thing. The other thing we're going to be clarifying in the plan is that, the county will try to assist whenever possible. When there's adjacent redevelopment, let's say, will assist with, again, the improvements of public spaces in conjunction to projects that are developing or coming forward with a site plan. With a site plan. And of course, that's going to be dependent on the specific site conditions, the timing and funding that's available. All of that goes through its own process in terms of identifying what funds can be allocated through the CIP. But we will be clarifying that the county is interested and will be looking at opportunities for investment in those specific, under those specific conditions, let's say, or opportunities.
Okay, so yeah, so just also piggyback on Coke, I think it's really important that there be. I know that you want flexibility, and I think obviously we don't want to have it hard and fast and that you can't break this because some of our zoning rules are like that, and that's why we can't change those things, which we're gonna be talking about next. But you know, if we don't set goals and we don't set targets that we're looking for, it's not gonna happen. You know, those spaces will become hardscape. They won't, none of them will be green and we call green spaces. The other thing I was going to say is also is that this often I find a mixing of public space and green space meaning the same thing. They don't mean the same thing.
Right.
Other spaces that are privately owned public spaces are not parks. The exception
Right.
to that, what Amazon's done in
Right.
in Pentagon City.
Sure.
But the vast majority of these spaces are hardscapes with biophilia around it. And so I really want to urge you to use this as an opportunity to when you say green Main Street, make it green. Use as many opportunities as we can to make this park space and not just public space, and to make it park land so that the county can build on its inventory of park land that we have.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adam. If I can just follow up on that comment. I tripped over your statement that the privately owned public accessible space will be maintained by the private developers,
Mhm.
which gives me quite a bit of concern with respect to whether the county's values of planting native species and maintaining a certain percentage of tree canopy will be able to be pursued and maintained in these privately maintained areas, and who would enforce it and how would enforcement occur. So that's just to follow up on what Adam and Colt were talking about. I also had a reaction to the photos of the various types of spaces, and I noticed that you know, they are not overly filled with native plants and native trees, and there, you know, there's a lot of hardscape there. So just and at this time when, you know, we're fighting climate change every way we can, I think that's a real high priority. My question has to do with tree canopy cover. I know the county is working very hard to try to increase, to get at least back up to the 40%, which evidently we have now dropped below. And so my question is, what are the backstops that are in the plan with respect to maintaining and increasing tree canopy cover?
Sure. So there were a number of questions there that I'll try to hit all of them. I'll start with the last one you just asked about in terms of the tree canopy cover. So the plan currently only identifies a target, let's say, for public facilities and parks that are owned by the county, which I can't remember right now what the number is, but the plan only identifies a specific target for those. We will be adding in the RTA draft additional specific recommendations for private development to provide specific targets for tree canopy coverage on site. So that's coming. But we do recognize that we want to get to the, you know, to improve the coverage along the corridor. As we know, the core itself has very little tree canopy coverage. So anything that we do is going to improve it, but we don't want to do just the minimal. We want to be able to provide very specific recommendations so that all development provides increased tree canopy coverage. In terms of the greening the main street or greening the corridor and the whole planning area, you know, we are trying to balance many different goals for this planning area. And I think one of the things that we said earlier on is that this area, for the most part, is pretty well served when it comes to, you know, the types of recreational facilities and parks and all of that in the surrounding area. Obviously, if there's new development or more density, we're going to need to augment it. and provide additional spaces to support the new population. So that's for sure. But one of the challenges that we have is that we don't have along Langston Boulevard large parcels of land that could be allocated, just for recreation or just for green space. And so in addition to that, we're trying to balance different goals. We need land to provide housing, to increase the supply of housing. So with that, we have looked pretty carefully at every square inch of land in every one of these neighborhood areas. Like, as I said, in the core where you have vast amounts of impervious surfaces, parking lots, where it's mostly commercial, and aging buildings and multifamily buildings that are also in need of redevelopment, to see what opportunities we have to create new public spaces. And so everywhere that we found an opportunity to do that, and then also provide stormwater detention and overland relief, that was a priority. So it's just been a challenge to try to accommodate more spaces, simply because we're trying to balance the different needs along the corridor. But I think overall, with the tree canopy coverage recommendations, with recommendations for greening, not just on site, at the perimeter of the site, on the ground level, but also on buildings, to create softer edges, we will accomplish that goal to green the corridor. It'll just take a little bit longer, and over multiple, it's going to have to happen over multiple efforts. It's not just going to be, through one park or through a series of parks. It's going to be a number of different things to be able to accomplish that.
Right. Well, I would just encourage you, I'll get to you next one. We had a wonderful presentation. I hope somebody can remind me who gave it, about the definitions of greening buildings and how much variety there is and how much miscommunication often goes into greenwashing sometimes.
Chris Kreider and
Chris
Laura
Kreider,
Schaub.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was a wonderful presentation, because they are working on refining those definitions so that we can all be speaking the same language when we speak to one another. And
Sure.
I think that strictly relates to buildings. Maybe I'm wrong, but I would love to see a similar set of definitions applied to green space. And so, to be XYZ type of green space, you have to have a certain percentage of trees or whatever. Something along that line, so much percentage of hardscape. So we all know exactly, what we're talking about. And then I'd also really love to see that there are requirements for native plantings, not just, crepe myrtles everywhere. Okay, so I'll stop there and go to Melissa.
So like Colt had mentioned, this is definitely a huge undertaking. I am personally excited to see the density to alleviate the housing crisis in Arlington. But I did have a quick question. I don't know if I missed it. You mentioned that that it was difficult to cross the north, south, east, west of the road, which I personally have experienced. But I don't think it was mentioned how that's planned to be alleviated. I think we just kind of went to the next one. So I'm picturing like the over crosswalks on it's not Tyson's Corner, but there's like a crosswalk over a big road, Arlington Boulevard. It's like I'm picturing that, or we're picturing 50 stoplights, like to just slow down the traffic, like tunnels. Is there any suggestion of what that will be? And if so, how we can make that perhaps public or green space if, we, I don't know, the tunnel could maybe have some stormwater implementations around it or something. So just putting that out there, if that's any idea, we know what those walking alleviations will be.
Sure. So the plan does have very specific recommendations for improving the corridor. I didn't share that today just because we had very limited time and I wanted to focus on the public spaces, but we do consider Langston Boulevard an important public space because it is the streetscape. So for the most part, we're proposing to reduce the lane widths, which will reduce the amount of pavement area. We're also proposing to create protected bicycle lanes, which basically adds a layer of landscaping along the street edge. And then in addition to that, another layer for street trees. So reducing the overall pavement area and increasing the landscaping areas along Langston Boulevard is one thing that we're proposing. The other thing we're proposing is providing additional crosswalks, improving very specific key intersections where we know there are just safety conditions, safety issues and concerns for people to cross. And then the other thing that we're planning to do, of course, is to encourage the use of transit. So by increasing the headways, so that, you know, they're not 20 minutes or 30 minutes, but instead they're 10 minutes, that would encourage people to use transit, as well as, you know, bicycling and walking, which will eventually reduce the number of cars along the corridor and make that a much more walkable, a much more pleasant environment. So that's from a transportation standpoint. But there's definitely ideas to green that corridor at least from end to end within the core areas, the areas that we're showing for change.
Thank you.
Sarah,
Thanks. Yeah, seconding the comments of other commissioners, which is a massive undertaking. This is a huge planning area. I don't think anyone's acknowledged that. Like,
yeah.
the fact that you have 5 sub areas is really, I think, testament to how much work you're doing, and I definitely recognize all of the competing priorities there. Within this plan, though, like focus on stormwater and also privately owned public space, and the language about using privately owned public space for stormwater mitigation, I think is really, really promising, because I think, you know, encouraging functionality of those spaces, both from a recreational perspective, but then also an environmental perspective, will get at some of the issues we've seen in site plans about them and it not really like being maintained very well. Like if it has to be maintained to mitigate flooding, then people will maintain it, right? But I am a little concerned, like in the design guideline section for the privately owned public spaces, there isn't really any strong language about stormwater and low impact development and kind of how those spaces can be designed to be more functional. And so I'm wondering if, you know, there's an opportunity there to add a bit more detail and specification and recommendations on what those types of changes to the spaces could be to achieve the overall stormwater goals of the plan. But in the weeds, I guess, not, you know.
We'll take that into consideration, sure, to see if there's anything we can add to add more detail.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was just thinking about a little bit out loud, so this might be coming from left field, but if we're going to be reducing the amount of traffic and the lane width in this corridor, are we expecting that some of the traffic will divert to other arteries like Wilson Boulevard or Route 66? And have we figured out how we're going to address that?
So we've analyzed the traffic issues, and there's Ryan. He can give you a bit of a summary of the analysis. But yes, we have analyzed it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something we certainly needed to be thinking about in concert with all these land use and public space changes. We did do an analysis that compared like the current future that the MWCOG sees for 2040, and we compared that to the future that Plan Langston Boulevard imagines. And we were particularly concerned about, would we be pushing trips onto nearby streets? And what we found in that analysis is that that really wasn't happening. Maybe there were a couple spots where the congestion went up just slightly in 2040. But for the most part, the emphasis on transit and bikeability did a lot to offset the increased trips that would come with the growth.
Right.
And basically the remainder of the network had very minor impacts, almost negligible.
And in fact, we did the increase in population, more people.
It did incorporate that, because we were using, again, the MWCOG model that anticipates growth throughout the metro region. So we were taking into account as well, by doing that, trips that might originate in Fairfax County and end up in DC that this plan can't really directly influence, but still may move through. So those factors were part of the analysis by using that COG model to do it.
But if you don't mind me pointing out, this isn't just that. You were talking about adding substantial amounts of density in these different districts, well beyond a region-wide guess or estimate about, trips or population in the past. You're talking about adding an enormous amount of density all along parts of Langston Boulevard. Was that integrated into?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
What is the expected increase in population along the corridor? Based on the density?
So we know it in units, right? Ryan, I think it's a net increase of approximately 10,000 units. And
Yeah.
just to clarify, the model that Ryan is talking about, he compared it to what the potential growth would be along the corridor based on these heights.
Correct.
So
And
it did account, right, for the projected increase, the projected 10,000 net new units, and therefore, the people and the cars.
yes, and the transportation analysis also accounted for the planned growth elsewhere nearby, like in Falls
Right.
Church or other parts of Fairfax County, or in Washington, Metro Washington, D.C. in general. So all of the growth that's currently in the COG model for 2040, plus what we were adding addition to that with plans to Langston Boulevard, was taken into account.
Oh, so you considered the 10,000 units as additive to MCOG?
For the purposes of this analysis, yes, we wanted to be on the conservative side and add that to the overall model. So we didn't, for example, take those units away from another part of the region. We considered it net additive to the county because we wanted to be intellectually honest and rigorous with what we were studying.
Okay, that's fair. Interesting.
And again, that's building in the assumption that there is going to be substantially enhanced public transport.
Absolutely, that's critical. The analysis proved how important that is.
Is likely in the form of buses, since most of these are not within easy walking distance of a metro stop.
The short answer is yes. A significant part of the transit set of recommendations has to do with improving the frequency and the experience of, so the frequency of the bus service, the experience of waiting for the bus. So the predictability and the frequency go way up. There's also recommendations that have to do with signal priority and other things that make the bus trip the most predictable and kind of the path of least resistance out there in the future compared to other modes. There's also, it's important to note though, that the improvements in the streetscape that account for, that help with bikeability and walkability in general are also really important. So it's not only on the shoulders of the bus system to improve. It's also quite important that shorter trips be more possible by bike and by foot.
And this is the anticipation is that Arlington's County art system or whatever it is in 2040 will be shouldering this burden because Metro is not exactly doing well these days. And you certainly can't be making promises on what they're going to do.
That's a good point. So that was also the topic of the Transportation Committee's discussion quite a bit. Again, trying to summarize, and tell me if I get this wrong, Natasha, the folks at DES have talked about the headways that are necessary, and they've talked about the improvements that are necessary in the bus system over time, and they would be added incrementally to help encourage the right kind of development and to support it simultaneously. It is not clear, and it hasn't been committed to yet, whether it's a WMATA route or whether it's an ART route, or like you said, a future service that doesn't exist today yet. We're more or less at this point trying to identify what kind of service is necessary to make this new North Arlington system work, and who operates it, and that type of thing has not been committed to yet.
Well, you're right that we're getting kind of off topic.
Good idea.
I did want to ask one other thing, and I'm sorry, I don't want to monopolize anything.
Go ahead. Did you have, Melissa, do you have one more?
Mouse bus related, which is not our lane. Go ahead.
Yes, okay.
Others have commented about this too, and I just want to contribute to that I appreciate the complexity here and the fact that you've scrutinized the whole area looking for public space that can be used for all kinds of purposes. And that there's a lot of different facets to this. Stormwater, greening the street, and green and street stormwater in particular desperately needed along Langston Boulevard.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find though that in regards to parks and recreation, that the dependence on proposed privately owned public spaces as an adequate substitution for actual parks and public space, which can be influenced by the people who live in Arlington and which react to what people in Arlington want. It's completely inadequate for the type of growth that is being planned for here. And then when you factor that the transportation needs to these areas, I mean, there are places, particularly north of Langston, that are pretty well served in terms of parks and recreation, but they're also pretty well used. And you're going to be adding a lot of people, presumably a lot of families. They're going to need more, and they're not just going to need a plaza to hang out in. They're going to want playground space. They're going to want active recreation space. Adults are going to want active recreation space. And there's nothing in here for that.
Yeah, I have to say, I think that's a really good point. We are already like above max capacity. I think the county is doing a survey of the use in the parks, right, Marco? We're going to be getting a report on that whenever it's finished, but everybody who's played sports knows there's not enough space to play sports. And
The spaces are getting beaten up because they're overused in some ways.
yeah, so I have to echo that. I think that's a really important thing to think about. Yeah.
And one place to look for that, of course, is the community centers that are up there, Langston and Lee Center, in terms of how I know Lee's supposed to be renovated, built or something like that, right? Is that true? Is there a plan, the Lee Center to be redone?
I think it's in the queue.
It may be in the queue, but I would have to reconfirm
Okay.
that.
So, well, we have 6 more minutes. Does anybody? Oh, no, we don't. We only have 1 more minute. We only have 1 more minute. Yeah. So, well, let me just sum up by saying thank you so much. This has really been edifying. We really appreciate the hard work that has gone into this. And we appreciate you coming and listening to our comments. And I'm sure we will be following up with a written set of recommendations too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And yeah, we look forward to reading your comments. I did want to clarify that we will not be issuing or let's say releasing the RTA draft until the end of September. So in about a week and a half or so. We're getting ready for PC and county board RTA hearing in October, early October. So there's time when, when you get the revised or the RTA draft, there are things that we haven't addressed or there are things that are still missing. We're happy to come back after the RTA draft before we go to the county board for final adoption, which we hope will be in early November or mid-November, whatever that date is. We're happy to come back and, have some follow-up conversations if needed, to address those things. But hopefully the new draft will cover a lot of the things that you've outlined in your comments so far.
Great, great. Well, thank you for that offer, and we may take you up on it.
All right. Well, thank you.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The next topic item is the use permits for public spaces design processes, presentation discussion, and we are actually joined here by Walter Gonzalez, Irina Latzik, and Nick Rogers. So we'll kick it off to you guys.
Thank you, Marco, and thank you. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. My name is Irina Latzik. I'm a long-range park planning section supervisor with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and we are pleased to present you this evening the second phase of a broader zoning study related to public spaces, and this phase focuses on use permits for public space processes. I am joined tonight by my two colleagues, Nick Rogers from the Department of Community Planning, Housing and Development Planning Division, and as Marco mentioned, Walter as well, who is a planner with DPR. During this presentation, we're going to try to make it as brief as possible, and you're going to see all three of us in the presenter role. So I'm going to start, and then I'm going to hand it over to Nick and Walter. So we are going to be also answering any questions that you may have after the presentation. Very quickly about the purpose of this study. The purpose of this study is really to explore adding a use permit option for the county board to consider case-by-case modifications of Arlington zoning code for public spaces to enable more flexibility about the location of facilities, where the facilities in parks can be located, to avoid environmentally sensitive areas, and to also reduce parking requirements where parking is unnecessary or other alternatives are available. This study originates in the Public Spaces Master Plan. You all know that that plan was adopted in 2019, and the plan included a recommendation to review and update the zoning regulations, and the plan identified some specific categories of the zoning that should be reviewed, and they're all listed here. Next slide, please. The PSMP, as you can tell, the PSMP envisions this as a very broad study of many and very complex issues related to public spaces. So we envision this study as a three-phase approach. A first study was completed in March. If you remember, I believe in October of last year, we came to you and presented the stormwater management study with a public space component to it, where we addressed not only stormwater management facilities, but also placement of certain public space amenities in the setbacks. And we also increased the maximum height requirement for fences and walls in public spaces. So we already finished the first phase, and it was adopted by the board in March. And this is the second phase that we anticipate to finish this winter. Phase 3, which is a more comprehensive and more robust study, we hope to commence in next year, sometime next year. So I'm going to hand it over to, I believe, you, Nick.
That's right. Thanks, Irina. So in looking, as we were coming out of the first phase of the study, we knew we wanted a near-term tool for the county to utilize for some forthcoming capital projects for its parks and open spaces and other public spaces. And we have some precedent that we're drawing inspiration from with a zoning ordinance amendment that was completed in 2016 to the benefit of APS, to the public school system. Several of you may recall at the time that APS was embarking on several simultaneous construction projects to increase capacity at new and expanded schools. And some of the strictures that were identified in the PSMP were at the time similarly applicable to our public schools. And so what the board did to allow that case-by-case flexibility to go along with those individualized reviews was to expand the use permit flexibility, to expand their modification authority to account for tweaks and other modifications to existing regulations related to maximum height, setbacks, density, and parking as well. And so for a brief moment, Walter, for the next slide, we want to make sure that we're educating the members of the commission about the use permit process. This is a type of land use application that a business or an institution can file in order to receive approval for a type of land use activity that is generally acceptable and desirable in Arlington, but if located at certain, if established in certain types of locations, may cause different types of land use impacts, oftentimes transportation related, or there could be impacts related to nearby residences. And so because of the potential for concern, the county does not permit certain types of uses, for example, bike share stations, outdoor cafes in the right of way, as well as live entertainment as well. That's that middle image there for with the DJs. Those go through a county board review process that oftentimes they are on the consent agenda. Staff has reviewed those in consultation with adjacent property owners and adjacent civic associations. And so oftentimes the use permit is permitting a type of use. But next slide, as with the schools process, sometimes that use permit can be used to modify individualized zoning regulations, whether it's the parking requirements for a childcare center to allow for a reduction, or for an outdoor cafe to perhaps expand the number of seats or expand the hours of operation, again, on a limited case-by-case basis, and the mention for schools as well. What we're evaluating are different measures and individualized zoning regulations that can be relaxed or modified in some way, shape, or form to the benefit of the public space system. And I will clarify, this is predominantly for parks that are operated and maintained by DPR. I know a lot of the conversation with your last item was related to POPs that are coming through the site plan process, privately owned public spaces. We're really talking about DPR operated parks, our public park system, with the heart of this zoning study.
So you may find yourself asking, why should the county change? Why should the county zoning change for the public spaces? The purpose of the study is to identify opportunities in our zoning standards for changes that would enable more creative and efficient use of Arlington's limited land devoted to public space. The zoning standards, which control the placement and dimensions of structures in public spaces, have largely remained unchanged since the 20th century's midpoint. However, what we ask of our public space system has matured and evolved over the course of the years, and recreation has changed to include access to natural resources, environmental protection, stormwater management, conservation, forest, reforestation, sports, and other types of programming, as has changed over the course of the year and has created new uses for sports and illumination of athletic fields in certain contexts. After examining several public space projects that have been completed in recent years and considering how zoning flexibility could be helpful for the development of planning of future projects, staff landed on 4 main areas to examine with the zoning study. Increased height requirements to allow for taller structures, reduced setbacks to allow structures to be located closer to the street, particularly helpful for smaller sites. Parking modifications, parking flexibility to avoid unnecessarily adding parking to a public space when the space can be used for a more desired purpose, and signage to enable better wayfinding identification in the county's public spaces.
So we'll go through each of those 4 categories. Madam Chair, I'll talk a little bit about some of the applicable regulations, and then Walter will follow up with some examples of potentials and possibilities, sometimes from retroactive case studies as well. And so what you're seeing here on the slide are the maximum height requirements for both the S3A and the PS zoning districts. I know that the Parking Rec Commission is accustomed to seeing our park master plans and other park projects coming through the process, usually having S3A, sometimes that PS zoning. And the heights that we have listed on the slide here are absolutes. They cannot be increased or breached in any sort of way without some sort of potential modification, like like the potential amendments that we're suggesting and considering. We've listed some of the types of structures and amenities that appear in our public spaces that need to adhere to these heights. Again, here in Arlington, we don't have exclusions or other types of cutouts for the zoning standards that are applicable to county operated and owned parks. We need to follow our own rules. And so what we've identified with a lot of this study and going back to the PSMP is that those rules need to be adjusted to help maximize the public space system. So Walter, I think you were going to talk about Jenny Dean a little bit.
Yeah. Well, as all of you may be familiar with Jenny Dean Park, which went through a extensive public engagement process during the master planning process. And as you may be aware, this is the final design that was adopted and implemented for the park. And an issue for the park was that in the expansion and acquisition of some of the sites, the expansion of Jenny Dean Phase 2, some of the parcels were zoned M1, and the rest of Jenny Dean was zoned S3A. And throughout this process, there were improvements to the athletic fields and the athletic field lights. After reaching final design as proposed, the park improvements included 75 plus foot athletic field lights. The athletic field lights are required to be this tall to provide safe lighting levels while reducing light spillover and glare into the surrounding neighborhoods. The S3A zoning district allows for heights up to 68 feet, but the S3A zoning height limits are too restrictive to accommodate the proposal of height of the athletic field lights. So in this example, this is why Jenny Dean was rezoned to PS district, because it allowed flexibilities in the heights.
Walter mentioned some of the zoning ordinance's setback requirements as well. I acknowledge, Madam Chair, that this slide is a bit wordy, and I hope you'll consult this and reference this for further study. But you know, the idea, the main idea that we want to share is that particularly for smaller sites like the one that Walter is going to share momentarily, these setback requirements, which have a purpose and intent in order to create orderly spacing of buildings based on, from site to site, from property to property, they can counteract and impinge upon some of the creativity in the site design and layout that comes with the particularly a master planning process or other types of upgrades and improvements to the public space system. Now, the board has already adopted some flexibility for the play equipment, the trash receptacles, the bike racks, the performance stages, some of the common amenities that again are bolted to the ground and prior to March of 2023 also needed to be outside of the setback. So we've introduced that flexibility, or the board has already adopted that flexibility rather, for the smaller amenities that would be in the park. We think that there's a lot of utility in extending modification authority, again, through that use permit process on a case-by-case basis for different types of buildings potentially. And this diagram just lists some of just a pictorial of how when you start pinching in on a home site. This is a diagram from the zoning ordinance where those no build zones are on the perimeter of the property. Again, this is a typical diagram, a theoretical diagram even. As the commission can understand, not all of our public space properties are perfect rectangles in this regard. Yeah. And so, Walter, I think we were going to talk about Bailey's Branch.
Yep. So Bailey's Branch is a project that we wanted to highlight. Currently, I'm not sure if you're familiar with Bailey's Branch. It is a narrow linear 2-acre park situated in Columbia Forest neighborhood, and in the near future is set to start the master planning process for it. I'm not sure if you can see in the diagram below or the legend. It might be a little difficult, but I'll call out some of the things in the legend just so you can see on the map there. In the blue on the map, that is the RPA. The yellow line is the street center line, and the green is the park parcel property line. And these will come into play as we continue talking about this example here. So I'm sure if you remember on the previous two slides where you had the setback requirement to the front yard, given that Bailey's Branch is zoned S3A, currently right now, if you look at the park, you will see two lines of different colors. The first line you will see will be the purple dashed line. That would be applying the 50-foot setback from any street center line into the park. The following line you will see is an orange line, dashed line, which is the 25-foot setback from the back of the property line, which is be the green. As you can see, it doesn't really leave us a whole lot of space, buildable space. And as you can see in the park itself also, there are grade changes to the site. Half the park is in the resource protection area. It's heavily forested. And currently, based on the setbacks that were presented currently, given that they are front street setbacks, it's very limited space that we have and a very limited area to plan within itself in there. We'll have to push amenities closer to the property line in order to mitigate those concerns regarding tree canopy and staying outside the resource protection area, while also taking consideration topographical changes that or it's kind of hard to see in the aerial view, but I believe you should be able to see it on your left-hand side at the corner of the park here off Columbus Street. As you can see, it slopes upward, so there's topographic grade changes, which would present challenges when designing. Another example that we've been doing regarding reduced setbacks is there's been a request and consideration. There's been a request consideration of the placement of restroom facilities in some of our parks that currently don't have any. In this example, this was a community request near Drew Park and John Robinson Junior Town Square, in which the community expressed a desire for a restroom to be located close to the property line and close to the street in between Drew Park and John T. Robinson would be accessible and visible to users. But going off basic current setbacks, Drew Park is zoned S3A, and we'd have to apply the either greater of 50 feet from the center line or 20 feet from the property line. It's a little hard to tell on the drawing, but the pink line is 50 feet from the street center line and the yellow is 25 from the street right of way. Ideally, we want to place the restroom facility closer to the street, but current setbacks wouldn't allow us to. So therefore, we have to place the restroom facility further into the park, which would not be ideal, as there is also topographical changes. And then there's also a desire, it reduces our ability to locate the facility where the community ideally wanted it desired. Another example regarding setbacks, specifically related to courts and athletic field lighting, is Upper Bluemont Park, which is currently going through a planning process as well. Currently, the Upper Bluemont Park conceptual design has proposed a redesign of the Upper Bluemont tennis courts and park after a year-long community process, and the community expressed desire in reconfiguring and relocating tennis courts outside of the resource protection area and pulling them closer to Manchester Street. For Upper Bluemont, the design issues are the courts and the lighting poles for the courts encroach into setbacks, as this was done to pull the courts outside of the RPA as much as possible. In the next slide, you will see lighting poles for the tennis courts that have been placed inside the setback as well. Here you can see an exhibit regarding the proposed conceptual redesign of the Upper Bluemont Park. The same setback requirements for S3A apply here, the larger of either 50 feet from said center line of any street or 25 from any street right of way. As shown in the exhibit, you can see the property line in red, the RPA boundary in green, and the setback lines dashed, as well as the general location and plan of the draft concept plan. As you see in the exhibit here, there are 3 light poles circled in purple at the bottom along South Manchester Street. That would fall within the setback, and this is a common issue that we run into. The location of these poles makes sense given the location of the courts and help with illumination and help illuminate within the park boundaries.
So that third grouping of zoning regulations that we've been examining are the parking requirements. And so one of my favorite statistics that I like to highlight from the PSMP is the fact that 47% of our parks are no more than 2 acres in size. And so with that small area and with so much, as an old planning director that I worked for used to say, where we're trying to fit 10 pounds in a 2-pound bag, where we have so much that's going on with our parks related to natural resource management, stormwater management, casual use space, as well as more sport courts and other activities, the space is at a premium. And in the event that staff, in consultation with the community and others, may see alternatives or other opportunities to paving over our park space simply to meet zoning ordinance requirements, there we see a real opportunity to introduce some flexibility to allow the board to modify and oftentimes reduce those parking requirements. We think this would be really helpful for a lot of those smaller sites. Again, the zoning ordinance for certain types of amenities that would be placed in our public spaces, an athletic field that would be considered outdoor recreation, our courts, there would be a parking requirement that goes along with adding that amenity to one of our public spaces. And so this is a real essential piece that we feel should be included in what the board can consider on a case-by-case basis.
Continuing off that, just want to provide some examples for flexibility in parking, building off what Nick had just mentioned. As you see here, there are parks that are situated in urban corridors that have recreational amenities that require parking for those types of amenities, but given their locations, including parking was not feasible and would greatly impact the design and function of these parks. For example, here on your left, you will see 3 urban parks, which consist of Murray Park, Hershey-Milliken Park, and Gumball Park. These 3 parks are expected to start the master planning process, hopefully in the near future, for these 3 parks. As you can see here, Murray Park has active recreation with tennis courts. Hershey-Milliken Park is more natural greenscape, and Gumball Park is also a natural area as well. With these parks, if we were to add any uses that required parking on the smaller sites, specifically Gumball or Hershey-Milliken, they would, if we were to add any uses that required parking, they would only accommodate very few spaces and reduce the park space for meaningful uses. But without knowing the future uses of these parks, it's hard to plan for incorporating any uses that trigger parking requirements. Another example here that some of you all may be familiar with is Roslyn Highland Park. Roslyn Highland Park, this park project was done in conjunction with a site plan where we were able to incorporate amenities that would normally trigger parking requirements, as the site plan was allowed modifications to parking requirements as the project proposed enough parking for the entirety of the development area, which included the park and the building area as well.
And just as we're about to wrap up, I'll just very quickly note, the 2 things, we have a lot of text on the slide, but the 2 things that we're really trying to be mindful of when it comes to our sign regulations in the zoning ordinance. There's some peculiar language about the location of a flagpole near an entrance of a building. Well, in the event that we'd like to install a flagpole in a public space that does not have any buildings, we'd like to eliminate some of the confusion around some of those requirements for what our sign ordinance, the zoning ordinance's sign chapters cover regarding flags and flag signs. And then also with the identification of parks. Currently, the zoning ordinance requires that freestanding signs, like the one that's depicted in the image here for Benjamin Banneker Park, those need to be either 10 feet back from a sidewalk or 5 feet back from a property line. in some instances that 5 or 10 feet can be pretty crucial in ensuring that a member of the public or an emergency responder can properly identify the name of the park and orient themselves. So we have been asked by some of our internal colleagues to consider, is there some way to ensure that we can introduce some flexibility for a certain sign standards. And Walter, we can't hear you, unfortunately.
Sorry. Thank you. And this here, we just wanted to highlight the public involvement with the public space planning. I'm sure you all are familiar with it very extensively at this point. Just want to let you know here that usually for most of our public planning projects, we follow the county's 6-step engagement guide. Typical projects have 2 to 3 engagements, but larger projects will have more engagements depending on the complexity of the project. And these engagements can vary either in-person meetings, virtual meetings, or pop-up events in order to solicit feedback on top of online feedback surveys to solicit feedback as well. Usually with the engagements, the first engagement might be a visioning with the community, solicit feedback on design. Of course, it depends on the scope of the project and the type of project. Second engagement would be refining those concepts in order to come up with one final design. In that second engagement, third engagement would be finalize concept, refine it, and then hopefully a go for adoption for county board of that park master plan.
And if I can just add, Walter, this is very important because I think what we're trying to kind of relate to you is that this zoning study is not replacing any of this public space planning. You all know this, but I just want to kind of state it and confirm it. We are always going to have a public engagement for our either park master planning or design project. So we are going to work with the community to come up with a design that will then, based on that design, we are going to be asking for a certain use permit modification. So use permit modification is really just adding another process, extra layer of process, but it will allow the county board to consider the designs that sometimes possibly would not be meeting current zoning regulations. So just want to clarify that. And I think some of the examples, such as Bluemont, some of the other ones that Walter provided overview of, I think they're kind of proving this fact that we go through these extensive processes and there is a good things that we're trying to do to avoid the environmentally sensitive areas, to listen to the community, and then, you know, we are stuck with the not being able to complete the project because there is a zoning obstacle on our way. So just wanted to clarify that we're still going to have our extensive public engagement processes and for all of our projects, as you know, because you're all involved in that. So just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Time for questions?
I think Nick has a
one more.
final
Okay.
one.
We'd no, that's fine, Madam Chair. We would like and we'd prefer to have our work wrapped up and on the county board's agenda with their December meeting by the end of this year. We have several engagement. Really, our appearance tonight is essentially the first publicly facing conversation that we're having with some of the analysis that we've been working on and some of our thinking. We have an online feedback form that just went live today. We've shared that with Mr. Rivero, and we're hoping that can be shared with you and those of your neighbors as well. We do have a tentative date of October 3rd, a lunchtime virtual public information session that you should be seeing some mention of in county correspondence. And we plan to be briefing the Planning Commission's Zoning Committee next month on October 10th. And so I think with that, Madam Chair, we'd be here to answer yours and the other commissioners' questions.
Great, thanks. Just on this topic, so if we were to write a letter, what would we do? Just trying to figure that out.
So, I mean, I guess the commission can work on a letter at any point during the process, but I would imagine they would need one prior to the December county board meeting, if that is the time frame in which that's this item will be coming forward to them.
Okay, perfect. All right, and just to summarize and make sure I'm understanding the process that you're asking for, you're not asking to change any zoning rules. What you're asking for is to add a element of process so that zoning rule changes can be considered, that which is presently not the case. Is that a correct summary?
That's a great elevator pitch. I wish we had consulted you before we did the presentation. Yes.
Okay, perfect, good, okay.
And those will be done case by case. I think that's also important thing to mention. So even whenever we do go through the use permit process, that really relates and applies only to that certain use permit. So it would not apply to our other project. So we would again have to go, like if we to propose another project, we would have to go to another use permit process. So every time when we request use permit for a specific project, we will go through the same process. So just wanted to add that. So we are not changing at any time. We are not changing the actual zoning regulations for the S3A and a PS district.
Okay, and it's each one would require a county board determination.
That's right. Yes, ma'am.
So I guess you looked at the work associated with that compared with the work associated with inventing a new zoning rule, and you decided this was less work. Maybe. Anyway,
For now.
that's anything. Okay,
Yeah, I have so many questions, but I'm going to try to keep it to a couple. And it has to, it actually takes off from what Jill was just talking about the course of least resistance. So first of all, I noticed with the JD, you switched the zoning of the park so that you didn't have to deal with the height permits. What do you do now if you can't change the zoning to make that work? How do you get these projects, or do you just change the designs that they fit the zoning regulation?
So I'll try to answer that briefly. So there are a couple of things we have done in the past. So we either change the design, that sometimes happens. We have to just change it at the end. There is no other option. There is an option, as I think Walter mentioned, at Jenny Dean case, and there were some other examples as well. But in Jenny Dean, we ask not to rezone this park to S3A, which is normally where most of our parks are located, but to PS district. PS district is another public district which allows for park uses, so it's not uncommon completely. So, but PS district is mostly for different types of facilities. But this is something where parks are located occasionally. So we could, this was done in the case of Jenny Dean. And a third option, which we normally don't like to take, or we are not normally, it wouldn't be an easy process, is to ask for a variance, to go through a specific process to ask to go through the Board of Zoning Appeals and ask for a variance from the zoning regulations. So that process is usually very complex. I know that our planning department and the planning commission do not usually support requests like that, because it's really in the request for the zoning variance, you have to prove hardship. And hardship is not just, well, this is design that the community wants. That wouldn't really be appropriate hardship. You would have to really prove that, and sometimes we can do that, sometimes we can't, prove that there is something unique with that site that would allow, there was nothing else we can do. We just have to ask for a variance. This is the only option that we have. So variances are hard to be approved, you know. So I think Nick and you can help with this part, because you know more than I do about this. But I think that is kind of to summarize. Those are three typically what we do for some of this when we know that we are not meeting zoning regulations.
Nothing further to add.
Okay, so that actually leads me to my second big question. And first of all, thank you for doing this, because it's ridiculous that you haven't been able to do this before. And so I appreciate the fact that you are doing this. But I would suggest we need to go further, because even the use permit process is a process you have to go to. And the idea of having to go through a use permit process in order to be able to put a sign in a different place in a park than you can right now is ridiculous, the waste of a lot of people's time and money to do that, because you have to spend the time putting together all the arguments with it, and it's just ridiculous that we should have to do that. So, a couple of big ideas I have. First of all, defining a structure. Right now, I guess it's defined as something that's attached to the ground. Was that the intent of the setbacks and the height requirement? Is it they want all structures, even poles, to not be above that height. So one of the things I'd like to consider in phase 3 is instead of having to go through a use permit to get light poles to be higher than they need to be, why not take light poles out of the zoning requirements in the first place? So that you don't have to even do that, because it's not, I doubt that was the intent to say that we couldn't put a light pole that was higher than that because the intention was probably more about building structures. But anyway, I think maybe similar about how the playground equipment can now be, why should playground equipment even be considered part of the definition of a structure in that sense? Second idea, first of all, why was there confusion about whether the flagpole ordinance applied to a place that had no buildings? I mean, if the ordinance says no building and there's no building, why is there confusion? Is it just clear that the flagpole ordinance doesn't apply to this?
Unfortunately, I don't have a good answer. Oftentimes those sorts of determinations are done on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, I'm sorry, sir. I don't have a good answer to on sort of not just the intent of that regulation, but sort of the outcomes. Let us take that back and in some of our memos to the zoning committee and to the county board, make sure that we're crystal clear and have those details ironed out. That's on us.
And that's, I mean, it's just, it's more because it seems like all the time that there's the county applies such a strict and there is the zoning ordinances in a way that is not necessarily the intent, but it's designed to prevent us from people saying anything or complaining or suing. It's kind of a risk aversion strategy, but it's just ridiculous that, again, that you should have to go to the county at the county board to ask for you to be able to put a sign in a different location than what the ordinance says you have to do.
That's helpful feedback.
So I really urge you in phase 3 to work on what are some things that you can just take out of the zoning ordinance altogether. And so that they don't even apply to these. Still have them as guidelines, of course, but not something you have to go to the county board in order to be able to change.
Sarah?
Yeah, I'm just strongly associating with Adam's comments. The more we can do to make parks easier to build, the better. I don't think anyone in this room disagrees with that. So really commend you all for this work. And this is definitely a good interim phase before that phase 3 where we're looking at, more concrete zoning changes, but I think you've got the support of this commission behind you on that issue. So looking forward to that process when it comes. Sure.
Thanks, Sarah. Is there anybody online, any commissioners online that want to make comments or have?
I'd like to add one other. That is, thank you for coming to us so early in this process.
Yeah.
So many of the presentations we get a couple of weeks before we have to produce something, which makes it very difficult for us to put together a considered product. So this is wonderful that we have a couple of months to actually chew on this. Thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Any other comment? Well, I really do appreciate you being here. Alex is exactly right. It's really tedious but important work that you're working on, because I do want to underscore how important it is to save resources, your resources, and streamline things as much as possible. So, and we appreciate this a lot. And we're only 10 minutes late.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Thank you very much.
It was worth it. It was worth it. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
You too. Thank you.
The next item is an in-house item, to review the 2022 Bill Thomas Park Volunteer Award process and our potential awardee. So I guess we can kick it over to Melissa and the review team to see if they can provide us a quick summary.
Yes, so we met and there was a lot of discussion, but between the three viable candidates that were given to us, which was Beth Kaiser, the Tree Stewards, and the Friends of the Mount Vernon Trail. All were wonderful, lots of good work there, but we did agree that Beth Kaiser was the nominee from our.
Can you remind us who all the people were?
Oh, yes, sorry, we had, and on the committee was Bill Browning, who's a former winner of the award. Jennifer Souls, who's a Parks Department member who fights invasives, but I don't know her real title.
Oh,
That's her real title.
Resource
Key
protection.
invasive fighter. As well as committee members, Alex and Nelson.
Jennifer is a natural resources specialist.
That was a cooler title. But yes, so we discussed it, a lot of it went into it versus assessing the actual application. Some we felt, well, not like air them here. We were not quite as complete as others. We have feedback on that. We wanted to know if maybe in the future we could tell nominators, hey, maybe next year try us again and change this part of your application for a little bit better chance. Some we felt were more community focused versus event focused, like building community versus having events. Both are useful, but some of them are more long-standing and sustainable. We felt that Beth's application really represented that, as well as the locality to Arlington land. As we noted that some of them, such as the Friends of the Mount Vernon Trail, some of that's on national park land. So it's in Alexandria, so it wasn't quite as Arlington focused, but still very memorable. So any other thoughts from our discussion last night? Yeah,
No,
so
really well.
all are very earning, but we felt Beth earned it most.
Yeah, I would say I served with her and I couldn't agree more. Yeah.
All right, I think at this point,
We actually should point out that Jen had an observation that she thought that we should consider creating a second category and separating out applications for individuals vis-a-vis groups. That comparing the two wasn't quite fair to either one. And that in the future, we might want to consider. I'm sure there are reasons. I mean, there are only 3 viable applications. I don't know if that's something in past years or not. It may be that adding another category, if you only get 2 or 3 applications a year, isn't really a great idea, but it was something that she had thought of.
So she proposed having 2 awards, one for individuals and one for groups.
But yeah, last year there was only 2 people, an individual and a group. This year there were 2 groups, 1 individual. So I
It's
think
just not apples to apples.
yeah.
Yeah, there may just not be enough applicants to support.
Did you want to say something?
No, I didn't know groups were eligible.
Our men got it one time.
Oh, did.
Yeah. So what would be the process to make that change?
No idea.
Oh, like consider. Because it felt, for
But I
example,
mean, if we thought it was a good idea, like what would we do now?
So one thing I
I mean, I think
remember
it's-
when the award, I guess, guidelines were reshuffled, reimagined. I remember former Commissioner David Hell took that on. And he worked alongside, I believe, forgot who it was within our commission at the time, to come up with opportunities for in which that review process could either be streamlined or if there's other considerations that can be undertaken. So that might be something that this commission can pursue within the coming year. So that way, prior to recognizing a winner for 2023, there may be some new considerations implemented as part of the review process.
I mean, I think Jen might have a stake in this because if I'm not mistaken, she's going to be heading up a big volunteer. If we get budget for it, I think she's going to be heading up a big volunteer coordinating position or something. So that might be a feeder pool for, future applicants. And it might be pretty nice for her to be able to recruit more volunteers if we could, give them a little recognition. But, okay, well, why don't we take that under, I'll call you
I think it
later.
would be worthwhile if we had that information, be able to go back a few years and see how many applicants we've had, say, over the last 5 years, because again, if we're only looking at, 2 or so a year, then creating another category maybe just may not make a lot of sense.
That's a good point. I can look into that.
Well, unless she's gonna be spearheading a volunteer function. I mean, this is like gonna be a huge part of the forestry and natural resources plan. Is putting in a lot more volunteer, like building on the volunteers.
Well, if it happens, then that would force us to think about doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where she's
And
going.
we see the effect of
Right, right, yeah. It'd kind of be nice to work in team.
And Marco, we still need to vote as a committee.
We do. Yes. So, Vice Chair Barker, if you can move,
Well,
to,
it's a committee it's a committee recommendation, so we don't have to have a motion, right?
not a formal motion, but a second.
Oh, can the person on the committee second me or someone who's not on the committee second me?
Doesn't matter, I'll second.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so the motion is to nominate Beth Kaiser as Thomas Award recipient. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Anyone on the line opposed? Dean?
Dean's opposed?
No. Hearing none, I think. Okay, no. So hearing none, that passes.
Yes or no?
Yes, that's right.
So hearing none, that passes 9-0.
And thank you very much, committee. We appreciate it. I hope it was a rewarding.
Lots of volunteering happened. Good, nice to read about
Oh.
it. I might read the news or something.
Good. Good. All right. Excellent. Now we're ahead of time again. Report.
All right, no additional items on the staff report that I wanted to highlight. Just wanted to say related to this 2022 Bill Thomas Award is we are still working on getting the in-person reception finalized, hopefully for the October Recess County Board meeting. So that is actually a week prior to our meeting, which would be the week after that. So that reception would happen after that meeting, and then we would meet again as a commission, but that would be a virtual only meeting. It's our third one of the year. So that one, we'll meet virtually for that, but then the in-person reception would happen a week prior to that. That's the current making.
What is the date of that?
So the date is October 17th would be the date of the Recess County Board meeting potentially for that reception. And then the 24th is our next PRC meeting date, which would be an all virtual meeting.
How come our meeting isn't the 17th?
It is. Oh, wait, no.
Our meeting is not on the 17th.
That
And I
would
think
be the
the
third Tuesday though.
It would be the third Tuesday, but I think what we did was when we came up with the schedule for the year, we tried to not have as many conflicts as possible with the county board recess meeting. So we shifted it a week later.
That's gonna be what time?
It would be, I think, past, it would be either after 3 p.m. or after 6:30 p.m. when the board reconvenes for the items that were pulled from the consent agenda. But again, we'll to be determined on that.
Because I'm thinking we probably should make sure Beth can attend that.
That would be a good idea.
Yes, we will reach out to our comm staff so that they are aware of who the award winner is,
Okay.
but also the winners from the last 2 years, actually, so that their friends and families can also attend as well.
Right, okay, so that's being. taken
That'd
into
be
consideration.
nice, because it's like we missed so many years.
Yeah, it should be a really good turnout.
Oh, party.
Good part.
It's just the
Will
fun
there be
thing.
food?
Yeah, Shrudi's really cut.
Balloons.
Make sure she can make it.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there will be, so we'll
Okay.
try to give you more information as the time comes.
So, yeah, the sooner. we can find- But thank you for that. All right, you wanted, so nothing new on staff report?
Nothing new on the staff reports. We can move to the commission member reports.
All right, anybody want to, particular?
From the commissioner.
I forgot to send out a report on the Enerjag. We had a presentation from the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan And they accepted a large number of our comments that we wrote the letter about. So
From
that-
3 letters.
3 times the charm. So that was very gratifying. And we're going to be getting one more draft probably before it goes to the county, so we can still comment if we need to. One of the biggest points of interest had to do with what regarding deer management will be in the Forestry and Natural Resource Plan, because we still do not have a deer management recommendation. We did get a report that they'd gone through most of the comments and they look like barbells. There's lots of people in favor and lots of people against. So whatever we do, lots of people are going to be unhappy.
Yep, and there might be a lawsuit. And the whole idea is to follow the book so that it loses.
One of the interesting things I thought is that Alonzo said, however, in the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, we are going to state the facts, and the facts are that deer are degrading our natural environment in Arlington. So that's the most explicit remark I've heard on that.
The document that was for public comment was just the survey, primarily saying, you know, how bad the damage is. It wasn't necessarily recommendations yet, right?
Yes, there's no recommendation.
Right. This is our survey. What should we do about it? And then the engagement was the what should we do about it question. So the statement of fact of deer are, I think he even said, the biggest threat to natural land in Arlington, based on the Browse survey, is definitely going in the plan, which is good.
Yes, that was good. Yeah. Anybody else want to?
You want to talk about what David brought up at Energetic? Remember his comment about potentially adding or recommending a new section to the comprehensive plan for climate change resiliency and sustainability.
Oh, David Howell.
David Howell, yeah.
Oh, yes, do tell me.
Revamp. So I guess the county community energy part of the comprehensive plan is up for update in the next year or so. And that plan focuses primarily on building county buildings to be low energy consuming and striving for zero energy consumption across the county. But David was kind of spitballing and brainstorming this idea of, and for those of you who might not know, David used to be a member of this commission for a long time. He phased out earlier this year. Recommending a new, either revitalizing the energy plan or adding a new one that speaks to overall climate change resilience and adaptation, and not just looking at reducing energy consumption through vehicles and buildings, but thinking about the big picture of climate change adaptation in the county. Started thinking about it while we started talking. I don't know what he said.
I wrote that down.
But I was like, that's what we need, a climate action plan.
Right.
And he kind of put that out. So NRJAG, the Natural Resources Advisory Group, for those who aren't aware, is an advisory group composed of representatives from 3 different commissions. This one, Forestry and Natural Resources, and then C2E2.
Yeah, so G2C2, right, one of those.
Which they're the energy, environmental commission. Yeah, and so I mean, what I think David was thinking is really what is the true intersection of everyone at NRJAG, right? It's climate change adaptation and mitigation, and thinking about how we should be building a comprehensive plan element around that. Rather than right now, it's kind of in all of these pieces where we talk about it in forestry and natural resources, and it's in the energy plan and public spaces, but there's nothing that really ties it all together in a big picture. And so his idea was mostly just something for the commissions to think about, and as the energy plan update kicks off sometime in the next year, to start kind of communicating this interest to staff at the county board. And I don't know, thinking about my planning education, I think the real next step would be to convince the county board to approve this, right? Staff don't have the authority to create a new comp plan element. So it would be writing letters and public comment at county board meetings to kind of voice and support, and would probably require more coordination across the commissions and involvement from civic associations as well to get that support.
Right. But it's really, really stark when you look at our county energy plan. I think that's what it's called, comprehensive energy plan, CEP. It only deals with energy. It doesn't deal with the entire picture. But if you look at some of our neighboring jurisdictions, like Montgomery County, there's a really nice, comprehensive climate action plan that has all these different elements. So, more.
The energy plan is old.
And it's old.
Yeah.
Things have changed a lot.
And we have a new, what's the guru called? The title, I forgot his name, but
Yeah,
anyway, he's supposed to be like the climate action man.
Action man.
Right?
Yes, yeah, we pushed hard for that because we didn't have a climate action plan.
Right, it's just a sign maybe that we need some
Yeah, so
heading.
I think we got a lot to get it done. Good, thank you for reminding me.
But just things, food for thought, really, things to think about, not real action quite yet. But
Not quite yet, but
probably.
does anybody want to discuss that? Because,
I think.
okay, okay, okay. Yeah, if you don't want us to do that. All right, are we on to other business now?
We are.
Okay, well, since it's just us chickens, I would like to take personal privilege and recognize Colt. Today is his last meeting, and we're going to miss him so much. I took the liberty of contacting some of the former chairs, some other people, and they have some nice things to say, which I'll read to you. Colt Gregory has been what I would term the perfect advisory commissioner. This is from Bill Ross, the last chair, with Shruti saying it's true. He came in recognition with specific areas of interest and passion, but quickly began applying his intellectual curiosity, contributions, and efforts across the broad spectrum of PRC issues. Colt actively participated in the following areas, among others, always doing his research, interacting with staff, and as appropriate, contributing crucially to PRC discussions and county board letter authorship. Alcova Heights, lots of SPRCs, including National Landing, Jenny Dean Park, Design and Construction, Natural Resources, and Forestry Plan, so many times, and Interjag representative. He says, Colt made my job much easier, and I appreciate his service and friendship.
Okay.
And then David Howell, who we were just discussing, said, thanks to Colt for his 5 years of service as a dedicated and knowledgeable contributor to the PRC mission. He's made substantial contributions to work from representation of the PRC at SPRCs to informed and important expertise regarding urban nature and its benefits. I enjoyed his collegiality and enthusiasm, and I have been inspired by his knowledge and appreciation of birds in Arlington and our region. So he thanks you for your contributions to the mission of the PRC and making Arlington more natureful and biophilic. So I would just like to add, not only have I known Colt on this commission, but he's a very active member of ARMN, which is Arlington Regional Master Naturalist. And he might have been on the scene before even Beth Kaiser, I'm not sure. And and he's also served on the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. You lead bird walks weekly for the Audubon Society of Northern Virginia. You educate new naturalists from ARMN, and you serve as a mentor to park stewards, including myself. We will miss you tremendously, but we fully expect to see you around Arlington. Thank you for your diligent, impactful work on the PRC. And we will have a lot of work to do to fill the void that you left behind. So we wish you all the best. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Very much. It's been a real pleasure to work with a lot of like-minded people who are interested in moving nature forward in Arlington through volunteer work, through commission work, through analysis, all of the different aspects that we have to attack to save our limited few square feet we have left. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you and thank you so much.
Well, and we'll be calling.
Okay.
Okay.
We expect you to show up like David does to different things.
You still email. You know, that's PRC.
So, thank you so much, Cole. Okay, so we have a few little housekeeping things left. We have some letters to figure out. Trudy says she'll work on the plan, Langston Boulevard letter. I'm happy to work on that. Does anybody else want to work on that too?
I'm happy to either help draft or review, whichever she prefers.
Okay.
I don't know what her method is these days.
All right, and then how about the public spaces? Anybody else interested in that? Let's see, what do we have to do? Well, I guess it's just following up on the party.
Oh,
There's no letter. Oh, do we have to write a letter? We have to write the letter. You want
yes.
to-
Oh, yeah, we're
Okay. We have to write a letter saying that.
Oh, yeah, I'll put it on my notes.
Right,
Yes.
Okay, cool.
and,
We'll go back for the use permit one. Since we do have a little bit of time, is that something that maybe we should, I'm not saying wait, but that doesn't have to be done by next meeting.
oh, no,
No.
that one he said December.
December
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
when they're considering it to go to the county board for its review. So, I mean, you
Okay.
theoretically you have a good 2.5 months to work on it.
Okay.
Approved whenever the meeting is, whenever it needs to be approved.
Mhm.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
just give us a few days. I mean, what seems,
I'll just start working on it.
yeah, you may as well do it while you're fresh. I mean, if you're like me,
Right.
I'll forget again, so.
And just to consider this too, since there is that, oh, by the way, the online feedback form was sent to the commission about an hour before the meeting began. So whatever comes out of that too, may be something to look at as part of the letter as well.
Yeah.
So that may be something to think about, holding off on any major comments or questions until we get the full, I guess, breadth of the feedback.
Right.
We say waiting, they said November 11th, 14th
Yeah.
is when the request to advertise comes out. So that'll be at the end of the engagement process and probably the best time to see the full breadth of everything they've collected and put a letter together for December.
When will the feedback stuff be available?
Well, she was just saying that she would be happy to come back here. But I don't know if that meant after the feedback was finished.
I thought that was for the Langston one.
That was for Langston, yes.
That was for Langston. Talked about them coming back.
Oh, you're right, okay.
So this is your click here to join your feedback through Sunday, October 8th. Let me follow up and see when that feedback will be shared, because usually all of that's public information.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
we can certainly circle back and share that with the commission.
Right, so if we get it by our October meeting, then
Yeah, that would be good. All right, and Melissa, you'll do the letter with Nelson. And then there's a Clarendon Presbyterian Special GLUP study, which I'm happy to serve on. We need 2 people. So I'll be the primary. Somebody else be-
Where is this?
This is the Clarendon
Clarendon.
Presbyterian Church.
They're gonna put in some senior housing.
Yeah.
Things.
Is that at the Clarendon intersection that's?
Now it's it's back in the neighborhood.
There's more than one. I'm not sure what you mean.
I
Oh, that's like behind there. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's Jackson's.
Oh.
yeah.
Right here. So
It's
it
just
is,
a church.
it's in the Lion
It's a
Village
church.
neighborhood.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not the big church that sold its underground. Or it's whatever.
Oh, Grand Right. It's not the one it's on.
No, that's further, that's a few blocks.
It's got the big steeple.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
It's actually right, if you just go down this way a little bit, it's there. That's
Okay.
Charles.
Oh,
James
the
Charles.
church.
Oh, okay. So this is near that new. Near the, no.
No, it's north. It's north.
I think it's
near
this
that
right here.
Corner of Jackson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where the church is.
So, yeah, what caught my attention was the senior living facilities. But do you remember anything else about it?
I skimmed through their letter. I didn't see anything about open space in the special GLUP, so I'm not sure that it'll be a huge focus.
Yeah.
I'm happy to serve as the alternate if you'd like.
Okay, thank you.
I've done a couple of special GLUPs in the Arlington courthouse area already.
Oh,
so
wonderful. Do you want to be the primary and all that?
we can.
I've never done one.
We can talk more after the meeting.
I'm really like behind. I should be more.
It's so much easier than SBRC.
Okay, well, we'll get our name. You'll get our names put on there.
Hypothetically.
It's time to go.
One other observation.
Yeah.
And you, we all have already thought about this, but if Colt is stepping away, what are his assignments and when do we need to redistribute?
He's got a lot. Well, it was, the FNRP was the major outstanding piece for walked through that whole thing, and then finished Jenny Dean Park, which was thing in Alcova Heights, which both of those are done. So it's the FNRP that is the big piece.
You've got 3 on
And,
4 Mile Run and golf.
well, 4 Mile Run is it's all over.
It's
but
pretty much done.
I mean, yeah, it's
Golf Branch
Yep.
Stream. That's
and I'm on Gulf Branch Streamers, but I think I'm on that as a citizen.
All right, well, will you come back and tell us what?
Yeah, so the Gulf Branch Stream Restoration, I'll have to ask and see if I thought I was on there as I don't know if I'm on there as a
layperson.
or as a commission.
You're in our agendas.
So, really?
Okay,
Yeah.
well, I mean, the good news is we
Well, I
have
should find out.
2 new commissioners that,
Because that's an
talk
important
as well.
piece. That's, the Gulf Branch Restoration is going to be an important piece. Now, they're also revisiting Donaldson Run in that area. So,
They're revisiting Donald.
well, the original,
Oh, step 1 or whatever.
right, step 1 didn't turn out as planned.
Did not.
Isn't there another phase?
Jenny Dean Phase 2,
Yeah,
yes,
yes.
that's going to be starting up for design development probably within the next few months.
Yeah, so that's true. Sure, I was thinking of.
But he's not on the call.
Yeah.
So, that's a good point. So since you're among the newer people, it'll be good.
Generally, I would recommend if you haven't gone through the park planning process, there's a couple of new parks coming up. And that's worth going through an area, a park that's in your neighborhood. It's worth going through that planning process to hear about people who want dog parks versus playgrounds versus, all kinds of different uses. But if you get a chance to do that, it's a good way to look at the planning process.
Okay. Anything else that's good to point out?
Yes, a playground for different ages of children. And depending on how many years the process goes on, there are children.
Well, and to your point, Colt, within the next year, I think we're envisioning having quite a few opportunities for public engagement and for commissioner involvement within these public space processes. So we've got, we heard a little bit about the 3 urban parks. That's one of them. We've got Metro Market Square, which is starting off pretty soon as well. Gateway Park, Arlington Boathouse. That's another one as well. So there's a lot of different opportunities that they're going to be coming through within the next year, which will add on to this list. So.
Well, thank you guys so much for having a quorum and letting us vote. That was really close. And so we'll let Shruti know the good news when she comes back from Maine. So if there's nothing else for the good of the cause, right, everybody to the meeting? Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't know it was your last meeting.
Oh,
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Can I take my sign?
I don't see why not.
These are fancy. These are.
No.
White out your